Hey guys, welcome to the Cutting Edge with G Money, where culture meets crypto. Today's guest is an artist, researcher, and educator with a simple goal. He wants you surprised. He's been listed as one of Fast Company's most creative people and has won several recognitions, like the Golden Nica from Ars Electronica, the Interactive Design of the Year from the Design Museum of London, as well as being listed in Time Magazine's Best Inventions of the Year. Co-founder of the School for Poetic Computation and professor of MIT Media Lab, where he leads the Future Sketches Group. Please welcome Zach Lieberman, the artist behind the Adidas for Prada resource NFT drop. Hey, Zach, how are you? Thanks for taking time out of your day to come on.
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, first off, congratulations on the drop, and I know we're going to get into that a little bit because there's a lot to digest there. But I'd like to start off with something like this in researching your work and your involvement in the space. One of the things that struck me while looking stuff up was the fact that you used to charge your father royalties for telling stories about.
That's really funny. I don't know where you found that. Yeah, totally. So my father was a professional storyteller. Like it sounds like such a strange job, but he went around the country, around the world telling stories. Like that's what he did. He would, and he had stories like he would tell folk tales and he told like long historical stories and he had stories that he wrote about myself and my sister. And whenever he would tell a story, he'd have to pay us royalties. And we were like so excited. Like every time he would go out to another gig, we'd be like, "Did you tell our story?" Like, and yeah, it was super fun actually.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. That's
yeah.
hilarious. So like you're a Web3 native from back when you were.
I totally forgot about that.
Oh man, that's crazy, and it's
Yeah,
so funny, right? Because it's like just these simple little things as a kid growing up, right? Like, of course, you're excited when your dad is talking about you at his job, right? So it's
yeah,
cool to kind of see that kind of play out over time, long term with the royalties and everything that's happening in the NFT space today.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, like I'd love to start, like let's start at the beginning of like you growing up. So obviously your father was he was an artist in
yeah.
the form of storytelling. So what was your exposure to art mediums and what spurred your passion for the arts?
Yeah, so I grew up just outside of Chicago, and one thing that I always remember was going into the city, going to the Art Institute, going to other museums, seeing, that I just loved it. Like I was always so happy those days, and I think it was like as a kid, just getting that exposure and seeing exhibitions and seeing, you know, things that you don't even know what they are. Like I remember this Saul Lewitt sculpture at the Art Institute of Chicago, and it just was this like weird cube. It just changed whenever kind of like moved your head, it changed. And the years later, that stuff comes back to me. Like those interactions come back to me. It was a kind of, yeah, getting exposure as a kid, I think, is probably the most important thing.
Right. Yeah. And I guess as you grew older, right? Like at what point did you decide that you wanted, to go down the artistic path?
Yeah. So I loved art. I studied painting and printmaking in college, and I fell in love with the printmaking studio. And the thing about the printmaking studio is it's really social. Like everybody's in there making stuff, putting ink on a plate, pulling a print. You usually think about people making art, you think about it being like alone, right? Like an artist is in their attic, just, working alone, and kind of like it just feels like this very solitary experience. And when you're in the print shop, it is social, and I just loved it. I fell in love. I really, you know, if I could, I just was so happy, like just really so happy in that space. And then later had to get a job. Everybody was talking about Y2K and the world's going to end in the year 2000, and all my friends were getting jobs as web designers, and I got a job. I learned these tools, and I fell in love with coding. And I didn't know you could do it for a living. It was just something I just really enjoyed doing and spent a lot of time kind of getting into and making art through code.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think one of the interesting things is that you're, one of the first like digital art, like coding artists, right? Where you use code and generate art over time, and so I guess my question is, how did what was your first introduction to NFTs? Because it seems like over time that would be something you would naturally gravitate towards.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm active on social media. I do sort of daily sketches and post a lot. And I remember getting contacted by different, like, oh, we're selling art this way, like sort of prior to November last year, I just wasn't paying attention to it. I just didn't understand it. And then, I saw like what Beeple was doing. I saw, all of these things, people that I know, like friends of mine having success. And to me, it was just really exciting and strange, a really interesting moment, kind of charged moment. And then it was really there's a curator at a website called Foundation. Her name is Lindsay Howard. And I know her from the media art world. I know her from exhibitions that she's organized. I really, really respect and trust her judgment. And she reached out. And it was really the initial contact from somebody that I knew, not like a cold DM, like, oh, you should put your work on our site. But it was actually somebody that I knew saying, we have this site, you should try it. And I did. And I was like one of the first artists on Foundation. And just, I think from there, just got really excited about it.
Yeah. So, I over your career, you've definitely experimented with, a lot of different programs and mediums. So as you've been delving into the NFT space, what do you think it enables or it makes possible that wasn't there before for artists and creators?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that it enables kind of at a fundamental level is thinking about the way to make digital media scarce and ownable. So you think about a digital file, it's like it could be easily recreated. You can make a perfect copy of it, and that's a beautiful attribute of a digital file. Like that's something that's really amazing about it. But there hasn't been really great ways to sell the work, right? It's been really hard to, if you're somebody who makes images or video, it's been really hard to, find a marketplace. I make prints, I do all these other things, like in order to kind of put my work in people's hands. And here was this way with digital files, to put it in people's hands. And it's not about exclusivity. It's not about making one of something, but it's about kind of enabling a sense of ownership, enabling a kind of ownership that, to me, that's exciting. I think a lot of the mechanics around royalties are really exciting. So you referenced my dad, but like that was, for me, that was like the first moment where I was like, that was really surprising. Like the first 10%, something gets resold and you get 10% automatically, and you don't have to, I remember chasing after my dad and like being like, did you owe us money. And like, here was this thing that was like automatic, and that was baked into the work and baked into the contract. And to me that, that was really exciting.
Right. Yeah. And, established artists, it's funny because in conversations I've had, there have been, sometimes it runs with collectors as well as with artists. Your range of responses just is very different, right? I've spoken to some established artists that have been like, oh, like, I don't care for the royalties, right? But then it's also like, well, you're making millions of dollars on like the initial sale. So maybe to you, it doesn't necessarily matter, but to an artist that's just getting started, the royalties really do matter, right? And it's like, that allows them to kind of have that freedom to go being creative and not necessarily having to do something to pay the bills per se, right?
Sure. And there's also, I think when you're making, you're making and selling stuff, you're also thinking about kind of like, what is the marketplace? Like, how am I, what work am I putting out into the world, and how am I pricing it and making a kind of, I think you could like there are all these knobs, and you could say like, I just want to make profit. Like, I just want to turn, the knob like all the way up to 11, but then you'd put work out there and like people wouldn't be able to resell it, or, there is something about kind of having a relationship with people who collect your work and thinking about how to build a kind of, a healthy body of work. And, royalties play into that for sure. So you can see like, am I putting out work that is actually changing hands and finding the right owner and finding somebody, I'm happy when people hold it for a long time. I'm also happy when people sell it. And for me, it's really about kind of seeing how the work and the market around the work exists. And like it's farming, like you have to tend to it. It's you can't just let it be. Like you have to be thinking about it and make informed decisions.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen in the space is like the creators and the artists that really interact with their community become the more successful ones, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about that connection, right? Like I bought a piece yesterday, and before I did, like I reached out to the artist and I was asking them about the piece that I was interested in, and we got on the call and we spoke for 20 minutes. And like, to me, like, that's awesome, right? Like it's great because now I have like a new friend. Not only do I have a new piece of work, but I also have a new friend that hopefully I can have great experiences with going forward. And I think that's one of like the beautiful things, right? Like, and to your point is, it's not just, and not that it's wrong, because maybe some artists are introverts and they just want to put out pieces and they don't want to talk to their collectors or whatever, and that's fine, right? Because that's part of their creative process. But I think like one of the beautiful things that I've liked is the fact that there's no middleman in there that is kind of curating what my experience is by collecting a piece, right?
Yeah. And you know, it is I think that relationship and just the conversations that come up for me is so interesting. I remember some of the early days in Foundation having conversations with people who bid on the work and didn't win, you know, but we're just like so excited, like, you know, we're all like kind of refreshing the browser, seeing
Right.
the bids come in, like it's like, and then getting an email from somebody's like, I was bidding, I lost, but like I love your work, I want to talk to you about it, and just getting into dialogues with different folks. For as somebody who makes stuff, it's really helpful to see how other people see your work and have those conversations and get to know the people who are interested in support your work.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's incredible, right? That sense of community, which
Yeah.
I think it's kind of prescient to what you're doing with the Adidas Prada NFT, right? Is like, you know, you as the artist, you invite participants to become performers in it, right? And that's increasing that bond even more, you know? And I think that's something that's very present in this piece. So, you know, how did that idea emerge? You know, that idea of co-ownership, co-creation and co-ownership.
Yeah.
You know,
So I was contacted by a design studio, Web3 studio called RNA, and they were working with Adidas and Prada, and they were just really interested in this idea of a kind of communal project. And I had done a lot of mosaic work. Like I've done a lot of projects and explorations in the past that involve like making images out of images, working with kind of huge databases of images, finding ways to rearrange them. And, you know, we just started jamming, and we got, you know, it was one of these projects where I can tell if a project is really fun if I'm just sketching all the time. And I have like a folder in my hard drive with like screenshots, just like full info, you know, like screenshot after screenshot. We just started jamming, and I think the general premise was around, you know, here you have these two brands that are collaborating on this campaign. It's their third campaign together. And can we do a project that really kind of focuses on collaboration, where the community can be a part of it, where we can get a lot of people kind of minting work, contributing, and find a way to bring it all together into kind of one cohesive whole.
That's awesome. You know, I think the response on social media has been incredible, right? Like people have been excited to take their picture, run it through the filter, and hopefully be part of the actual total piece. So I know I'm super excited. So it's been pretty cool. You know, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on Discord yesterday when the minting was underway, or when sorry, not the minting, but the submissions were underway, and it was like, it was unreal. Like we had to switch the Discord to slow mode, but like for a moment, just everybody was just throwing their images and like what they made, and it's so beautiful. And sometimes people have these like amazing stories, like this is a drawing that my son made for his grandfather before he passed away, or another person had a photograph of a cat, and she's like, my cat just passed away, but my neighbor's cat posed. And you know, it's not like, it's like people are not just making a small thing, but they're also like putting their voice into it or trying to tell a story. There's a lot of people who post the kind of before and after, you know, and that's so, I feel really touched, like really, really touched to see all the things, creative things, people reverse engineering it. They figured out how the filter works. They like put the picture in the right way so that when it's you know, people are like having fun for sure.
That's amazing. Is this the first time that you've done like let's say a co-creation, co-ownership project like that?
Yeah, definitely. I've done, you know, a lot of the interactive work I do. So I do a lot of like installations and exhibits that involve just inviting people to step up and perform and make the work. So I'm quite used to that sort of thing. I've done, you know, online projects where I invite people to, you know, to participate with them. But this is definitely one where it's like the idea of submitting content is such an important part of it. So it's a first for me.
That's awesome. Was there like a very technical part of the process? Like how will you be working on it now that you have all the submissions to kind of make the final piece?
So I have been experimenting a lot. Obviously, I don't know the images. So when we're speaking right now, it's before the artwork is launched. But I have been working with a lot of test images. So, I've been experimenting with lots of different collections and databases of images and trying to kind of figure out how to rearrange them. And the same way, like the filter is kind of scrambling the underlying image, the software that I'm writing is almost kind of unscrambling or trying to find a way to rearrange or recompose these pictures to make new pictures. And for me, it's important. I think we're all like familiar with photo mosaics. We know, you can make an image out of other images. And for me, it's really important that it kind of like be really aesthetically interesting and kind of play with the mechanics of the squares and the form itself. And all of like, one thing that I was really noticing from a lot of the submissions is all of these colors, like all of this really rich, vibrant color that people are putting into their work. So it's going to be exciting to figure out how to use that and play with that. And so my job is kind of to write these software, to write this code, and and set up the system. The computer is going to kind of scramble through and think about kind of just an infinite number of combinations of these objects to make the right image.
Right. Yeah, and then you're gonna choose the final one that you think looks best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. That's awesome. So I guess as an artist, right, seeing all the momentum that has kind of been built around this project, does this have you been thinking about maybe other ideas of like, oh wow, like maybe I don't know what your expectations were from the community going in, but like, would you say that your expectations have been met, exceeded, below expectations?
Yeah, no, like definitely exceeded. It's one of these things. Like, obviously, you work with brands like Adidas and Prada. Like they have attention, and they say like, here's a project, like people will jump at it. But I was like, I don't know. In the back of my mind, I had this like doubt, like, what if there isn't 3,000? What if 3,000 people don't do this? Like, what if? Well, I don't know. You have these doubts. Like you're just like walking around worried about everything, and then I can't say numbers right now, but it's like way more than I thought. Like it's just like phenomenal the amount of enthusiasm and energy that people have put into it. So I'm way exceed my expectations are way exceeded, and now I feel like between this conversation and when the artwork drops, I like now the bar has been raised for me. So it's really exciting.
So have you been thinking about like other like ways to kind of do something experiential like this in the future?
Yeah. I love the idea of I really like collaborative art and things where people can work together. So yeah, this project, I can't think about anything except this project right now, but this is definitely something I want to revisit in the future for sure.
Okay. Yeah. I guess just to switch gears for a moment, I kind of want to just go a little bit deeper on your day-to-day, like as a professor and as somebody that teaches, the up and coming artists that are coming into the world. Do you currently discuss NFTs with your students?
Sure. I haven't talked about NFTs in the classroom, but I've had a lot of students that have been curious about it. So just interested, curious, and it's sometimes it's really hard when you're young, when there's something that's happening, you kind of want to be part of it, or also you're not sure, and there is a lot of there's a lot of hype around it as well. So it's hard, I think, for students to understand, what it is. I think that's true of a lot of things. When there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of, kind of excitement, attention, energy, money thrown into a field, it's really hard to figure out like, what is this thing and what does it feel like? And so I've been, certainly talking to students about it.
Right. And I find that the thing with hype is that hype is born out of like the narrative of, right, like, holy shit, this is really cool. This is going to change like how we live as a society. And so then as that becomes, and you see this with like all hype cycles, right, where it becomes almost to the point like of a bubble, right, at some point. But that's because the narrative is so good, where it's like, like you need to be looking at this, right? And there will be up cycles and down cycles, but over time, it's like if you zoom out, what is the future of, provenance and art look like in a digital world, right? And I think as a digital artist, you definitely see the value of having some sort of digital certificate of proof of digital scarcity.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing that I always like to counsel my students on is to think about hype as this kind of, it's almost like that's a wind, it's a force, and it pushes in a certain direction. And your job as a student, as a creator, is to figure out like, how do you work with the wind, right? When you're sailing, you're kind of like, okay, the wind's going in a certain direction. I know as an artist, I want to go, like, here's where I am and here's where I want to go to. And can I use the wind in some way to kind of like, and to me, I think that's the right way to think about it. It's like, there's this kind of, there's an energy, and you should figure out what direction you want to go into and see if you can use that energy or not. But it's just like that. You should know that it's pushing in a certain direction.
Right. And to take that one step further is like, I love, and I love explaining the concept of NFTs to people, because then everybody is creative in their
Yeah.
own shape or form, right? Like whether it be being creative with a new business solution or being
Mhm.
creative with art, like we all have that aspect of us, right? That's part of being human. And so like, I'm just super excited to see how creative people become with this new medium. You know what I mean? Like for the same reason that, you know, when an artist has a physical installation, you know, there could be a unique experience with that. I think we're going to have very unique experiences in the digital world that maybe you can't have in the physical world because of physics, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that to me is like super exciting as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I guess, you know, as someone who currently teaches young adults and the next generation, what do you think we can do to bring more women in the space to create and explore, right? Because I find that in the crypto space, as a minority, I'm trying to get other minority groups involved in the space.
Yeah.
But obviously, because it's initially technical, you know, some people might be scared to dive in. But I've been trying to kind of help people understand that like anybody can get involved, right? And the world is your oyster.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I could speak to my own practice as a teacher. Like, I think one thing that's really crucial is thinking about who do I bring into the classroom? Like, who are the artists that we study? Who do we talk about? Whose work are we celebrating and researching? And like that act of curation is really powerful. That act of saying like, here's the syllabus, here's where we're going to go, here's who we're going to interact with, and the stories that we're going to learn and tell. And the same thing's true. Like if you're in a position where you're curating or you're organizing a conference, like that is a responsibility to think about kind of what is the world you want to see. And that act of curation, you know, it can have a really big impact. Especially kind of like, I think a lot about my status. Like I've been doing this for a long time, and the interactions that I have with younger artists, you know, I'm always like really excited to talk to younger artists and help however I can. And for me, that's, you know, I don't know. I think that's really crucial. And then I would say in terms of the field of generative art, which is the field that I'm, you know, kind of most strongly connected to, you know, learn about and find the collection of female artists and, you know, and get into their work. So for example, I'm a big fan of Twitter lists. So if you find an artist, I find generally if there's an artist that I'm curious about, I'll just say, okay, what lists have they made or what lists are they on? And for example, there's a list of female generative artists that I check every day, you know, that I can send you the link. You could put it in your show notes, but it's like, I check that every day because it's just full of these voices whose work I really care about. And I think if it's something that you want to see more of in the world, you should just surround yourself with those creators because they are out there. You just need to, curate your feed. You need to curate your syllabus. And I don't know. I don't know. I think that it starts with that. And then I think it's also about creating spaces, thinking about kind of what can we do to make the spaces more friendly, more inviting, et cetera.
Right. That makes total sense. And I think that, you know, I one of the things I like about this project is that it is open to everybody, right? It's like, and I guess we'll take that opportunity to go into the mechanics of the project for a second, because we haven't spoken about it yet. So there's 3,000 NFTs, right? Of which people are applying their submissions, right? And that will be filtered out. What's the reason? Because I know a couple of people have asked me, what is the reason for having the submission process as opposed to people just kind of, let's say, doing it without some sort of curation?
Yeah, I think there is maybe some, you know, worry about kind of like in the end, we're making an artwork, you know, that has Adidas and Prada's name on it. So just making sure that there's no like, you know, extreme copyright violations or nudity, or, you know, there are some rules about the artwork, which means it's important that the pieces that make up the final artwork be curated, you know, or not even curated, but just that they go through a round of making sure that they follow the rules.
Right. That they're
And the other thing is like the number of submissions. I'm not allowed to say the numbers. I'm sure later this week the folks who, you know, have been counting can say, but like it's like an insane amount. Like it's an insane amount of work. So I think the idea is like, you know, to have some sort of kind of lottery system, then, you know, choose 3,000 that way randomly, I think there's also some slots that are reserved for folks who participated in previous projects.
Right. Yeah. So it was from my understanding, it's 1,500. It's all randomly generated, random lottery. But of the 3,000, 1,500 are being reserved for the Into the Metaverse people that hold the Adidas NFT. I believe there's a certain number that are for people that tried to mint the Into the Metaverse but weren't able to and lost gas, and then the rest of it will be a random lottery for people that submitted. So I think it's a pretty good distribution of people and inclusivity and allowing everybody to participate. Is there a reason why you chose the number 3,000?
So at some point, so the final artwork that I'm going to make is made out of these pieces. And at some point, there is a limit. And a lot of that has to do with like the file size for what we're going to mint as the final artwork, the kind of way that you interact with the pieces, the kind of story that you could tell. At some point, they become too small within the final artwork to be meaningful. So for example, if you said 10,000 or 100,000, it's just, then they're just pixels. It's almost meaningless. We really want you to be able to look at the final artwork, zoom in, see the pieces, see where they are on the blockchain, we want the final artwork to be something that is really like a kind of map of all this creative expression. And it's just not possible to do with, to mint something, to make a final artwork with more pieces. That said, seeing all of the things that people made, it's like, I wish we had done, I wish we could use more of them because they're so great. They're so great. So, maybe future projects.
Right. That would be amazing if this actually something else longer term maybe stems from this, right? But I think the concept has been really cool. And then basically, so then those 3,000 pieces will be arranged by yourself and then put up for auction on Super Rare.
Yeah.
And that's coming on Thursday, the 27th.
I think so. I thought it was the 28th, but yeah, okay, something like that.
Okay.
Like I get nervous. Gotta like speed up my process.
Like, wait, when's my deadline?
Yeah.
So okay. Yep. And so then when that piece does get auctioned, then how will the proceeds of that be divided?
So the cool, one thing that I really love about this project is that the proceeds of that are divided among the 3,000 people who participated, as well as being donated to charity. And that, to me, that's like a really exciting part of this project. There's both a kind of charity component, and then also this, like, the idea of people participating is also they have a stake in the final artwork.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's really cool too. And I believe that the royalties will also go to the co-creators, right? And the resale.
Exactly. And I was just talking to the folks from Adidas today, and the charity is called Slow Factory, and it's just super cool. I was checking out what they do, and they have this like really great education platform. And I'm excited. I'm always excited to make work for charity, and I just love that there's like both a kind of community, kind of the community that helps make this work are a part of it and they can benefit from it, but also, the proceeds from the sale of this work can also go towards charity.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of the cool things about this as well is the fact that it's free to mint, right? So it's not like you have to pay minting gas or costs, and because it's issued on Polygon. I think that's super interesting too. So I think it's like a really cool, novel way to kind of create art with the community, So I'm super excited for that.
Yeah, for sure. And you have a lot of people who are new to it and learning how to set up a wallet and, going through all of these things that's exciting. And just, I don't know, for people to feel like I'm excited that it's going to be like a lot of different people participating.
Right. Yeah. And so, I'm sure that you're bringing a lot of new NFT collectors into the space, right? With your following from, your traditional art background. I'm curious. I'm going to be very curious to see how many new wallets mint this as their first NFT, because one of the cool things when we did the Adidas drop was noticing how many new wallets were coming into the ecosystem. So I think through art, through culture is how we get mainstream adoption. So I think it's very vital that projects like this are brought to the forefront, right? Because I think this is what kind of helps push the narrative and helps describe to more people what NFTs are. For people that are coming into the space that don't know anything about NFTs, what would you recommend? You know, whether they be artists or just collectors, or I guess let's talk about it from the art point of view, right? Because that is your background. But what would you
Yeah.
recommend to them?
Like to learn about what it is, like how to get
Yeah,
started,
just
or
like how
yeah.
to explore, I guess, right? Like
Yeah,
what?
yeah. I mean, I think there are some great articles. I think the one I read recently is I'm gonna butcher everybody's name, but it's Matt Desalorius. I don't know if I'm saying his last name right. On Twitter, he's Matt Dessel, Desl, and he has a piece on Mirror, I think, which is like just an introduction to NFTs, explaining a lot of the kind of history and background and technology and some of the concerns and issues and so on. And it just feels really kind of like level, and it's just a good article. Like I think it's a really good article from the perspective of an artist, and you know, it's one that I will certainly recommend to students in the future. And I can share. I don't know if you have show notes, but I can share
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
the
We can put it in
yeah,
the show notes.
yeah.
That
And I
would
think
be
that's
great.
a great way to learn about it, and just um,
All right, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
What do you think? What do you think the space is currently lacking? Like, what do you think are
Mm.
like opportunities that you think um, that could be explored? But then also, like, what are things that you've seen that maybe could be done better, or that you
Yeah.
wish to do better?
Um, I mean, I like the kind of art block style, and there's on Tezos, there's a website, or there's a site called FX Hash that does kind of art block style, but on Tezos. And I think that is really interesting, but it kind of pushes work in a certain generative work, the sort of idea of long form generative work in a certain direction, which is almost a kind of random minting. You know, you kind of, it's really playful. Like I love ArtBlocks drops and FX Hash drops, just because you get to see kind of what the algorithm can do. But I keep wondering about other approaches that would kind of stay in the software space, but also allow for maybe more curated. You know, you could actually, as an artist, you could curate the outputs, or you could find random seeds that produce really interesting work, or you know, maybe the community could curate them, or I don't know. I feel like um, there's something kind of magical about that style, but also I wonder if there's other models. Like I really like the idea of kind of having software on the blockchain in some way, you know, doing this, having these sort of minting mechanics. But then, you know, I would be really curious, like what else is out there. I think there could be other things for sure.
Have you considered doing a release on ArtBlocks?
So
Because it
I
seems
went through, yeah. So I went through ArtBlocks. I was part of the curated. So I had a piece get accepted to curated, and I had a drop like in October. And I don't know if you remember, but it was crazy. Like August, ArtBlocks from like July, August, September, like it was crazy, and it was so much pressure. And I actually like canceled my drop because I um I just found like mentally I wasn't in a good place, because you're working on this software, you don't know exactly what it's going to be, you keep hitting refresh, you know, to see what it's going to look like, and like there is a lot of magic in creating work like that. But I also just felt like I almost I I became not like addicted to it, but you know, if you, I don't know if you've ever seen people who like play pachinko, like in Japan, they have this game called pachinko where it's like you put in a ball and it like bounces down and it's totally random. But you go into a pachinko parlor and you see people like staring at a you know, one of those machines, and it's just like their eyes are glazed over. Or like Las Vegas, you see people like gambling, you know, that. And I had this feeling of like, I'm so stressed out. I doesn't feel, you know, I want to do this. I'm happy to do something like ArtBlocks, but I want to do it when it feels right. Like I want to do it when I'm like super, it didn't feel right. So I postponed, or I'm, you know, kind of, I don't know, I canceled it, but I postponed my drop with ArtBlocks.
Right now, is that something that you think you might be more interested in if you are able to like curate the output to be like, all right, I like that one, or is that something
Yeah.
you like
Yeah,
the
for sure. Like if I could choose, like 1,000 of this thing, like that, for sure I would do something like that. And I do that in a way. Like I put a lot of work on not a lot of work, but I do a lot of posting like on Tezos, you know, Hicket Nunc, Versum. Like I post work there where I like take really, you know, sort of the best version of the software and put it out there. But I want to go back to it. I think as an artist, there was so much pressure because it just was so hype. It got so, you know,
right?
I don't know if you remember that time, but it was
Yeah,
just like,
it was a feverish pitch at that moment, like
it was a few,
late
yeah.
summer, Like
Yeah,
now might be the time to revisit.
yeah,
I feel
yeah,
like
I think
the
so.
competitive art craze has died down a little bit.
Yeah,
So
I
maybe,
think so. Because I kind of like I remember reaching out to those folks like in I don't know July or like June when it just was it didn't mean as much. And I think it's you know I think it having a little less pressure on yourself and having fun. It should be fun. Like
right.
for me, that's the most important thing, and that's something I always tell students is like do this thing if it's like if you're gonna have fun with it and if it's about the art and you really feel you know and yeah, probably it's a better time to come back to it.
Have you spoken with Snowfro?
Yeah, we've spoken before, and they were like so great. Like I was freaking out because I was having some technical problems, and like they're the thing that I would say about them is they are just like they are so great with artists. Like they are really, and I kind of lurked on the community for a while, and decided to go and work with them just because I saw how they treated artists, and I just feel I'm really supportive of the team there.
I'm sure he must have been geeking out talking to you because I know he's been a huge generative art fan even before he got into crypto. So I'm sure he must have really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, it's been cool, and it's been cool to like. I think the community there is really great. And then I would say the same thing. Like I don't know if you've checked out FX Hash, but like FX Hash is really fun. The drops are really fun, and I've been just enjoying it so much, seeing what people have been making there.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. I admittedly haven't. I'm part of a DAO that's been collecting work on Tezos, but I haven't necessarily been doing much collecting on my own just because of the cross-chain compatibility stuff. But I'll definitely check that out because I think that Tezos has almost been acting as like I don't want to call it the minor leagues because I don't want to like, but like it's like people because it's cheaper to mint and the art is cheaper. People have been going there, kind of do like some like let's say a little proof of concept before over to like Ethereum.
Yeah. And I think it's also it's like a fun. I think there are artists who don't want to do stuff on Ethereum, and I think that's valid. Like they come to Tezos for that reason. And I think there's people who go, on both, like myself, like experiment on in different platforms. I think because things are cheaper, like minting is cheaper, and a lot of the prices for things are cheaper. It's also just kind of like playful. Like you can have fun and not. I know, like sometimes I'll like mint something on super rare, like make a mistake, and then it's like I don't know, it's like a couple $100. Like I just messed up. Like I need to cancel the transactions. Like it's not like. You feel like okay, it's really serious. Like when I press this button, something's going to happen, and that's and that's the this thing is permanent. Like you're making something which is permanent, and you're embedding it into history. Like that's important. But there's a kind of vibe on Tezos which is about kind of play and experimentation that I really appreciate.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you looked at other chains, or is it really just Ethereum and Tezos that you looked at?
Those are the two, and then this project is involving Polygon, and I don't know. Might do a project and with Solana in the future, but I haven't really experimented with other chains.
Right. I think it'll be interesting to see is like different chains will have probably different functionality because of speed processing and costs and stuff. So I think it'll be really fun to see what creators do across different chains.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you can imagine almost like I like the idea of like, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily agree with like minor leagues and major leagues, but it's almost like I don't know if sometimes like those early days of Hick and Nook, it felt like punk rock, it just felt like so weird and just different than and like Foundation has a vibe, like these Super Rare has a vibe, like they have like made aesthetic choices in the interface and kind of how they present work, and they just feel different. And I think you'll see the same thing across different chains for sure.
Yeah, so I want to be cognizant of your time. So I know we have a couple minutes left. I just wanted to ask a couple last couple questions.
Yeah.
Where do you think the future of art will go from here?
That's a good question. I mean, the field that I'm in, the generative art field, I think one thing that I'm really curious about is how it's obvious that people want to collect this work. I'm curious how people can live with it, right? It's one thing to say like, okay, I'm going to purchase an NFT. I'm going to support an artist. I'm going to have it in my wallet. There are displays. See things like Infinite Objects or companies that are sort of oriented around displays and things that you can have in your home. But I think like one of the most amazing things is just being able to put something up on your wall and like wake up in the morning and look at it, and to have art and to live with it. And I think that's like a super interesting frontier And then in terms of technology, like I'm really interested in augmented reality and what does it mean when we have computers getting smaller and smaller and smaller, becoming part of our bodies? You know, you have like there's this thing. It's so stupid. I mean, I'm sure it's a really good feature. Apple has this thing with the AirPods where when you turn your head, you know, you hear like spatial audio, like you listen to a podcast and like you hear it, like you hear you. I'm always
Yeah.
conscious of the fact that I'm turning my head, but like that is because this thing you're wearing computers in your ears. You know, there's something really magical about that. Like we're gonna have computation more increasingly part of our body, increasingly something that we live with, and the question that I ask is like, how can we use that for art? How can we, you know, I want artists to be there. Like I'm sure companies, I'm sure advertisers, I'm sure, you know, brands will be there like putting messages in your face. But I want to see the world where artists are, you know, using these things and creating new, you know, new stories, new narratives, new experiences of the world. To me, that's really exciting.
Right. Yeah, and that makes so much sense. Does that mean you're going to be signing up to be the first person with the Neuralink implant?
Maybe. I have a friend. He's a musician, and he has been working on a project where he's trying to um, play piano, and there. I don't know. I'm going to butcher the technology, but it's like some sort of very strong magnet that sort of shut off parts of your brain that actually like incapacitates your brain. So he's trying to make music where he's playing the piano, but then there's like a device which is turning off parts of his brain as he's playing.
Is that even safe? Or is it,
No, it sounds totally unsafe,
yeah,
but he does
I
a
feel
lot.
like,
Yeah, he
I feel
does
like
a
that's
lot of
either good.
unsafe stuff.
I feel like that's either really good for your brain or really bad for your brain. I don't know which.
Yeah, there's a video like of a BBC reporter who's reading like Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, and then they turn off like the part of his brain that deals with language, and it's insane. Like it's totally,
I'm gonna
yeah,
Google that.
yeah. But anyway, I'm sure that I mean there's a lot to explore with the brain, with things like Neuralink, but also just even um, yeah, devices and systems that, you know, can play with consciousness or maybe even like wake you up when you're starting to have a dream in a certain dream state or something. You know, I think there's a lot to play with with uh, with kind of how we can use technology to be more creative and empathetic.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree, and I'm really excited for stuff like that. And then I guess one last question before I let you go is that I'm super curious because this was a question I had when I was reading your bio. Was I'd love to hear more about the School for Poetic Computation.
Yeah,
That,
sure. Yeah, so for years, I taught at a school called Parsons in New York. It's a design school, and I had, you know, been in like the university system for a long time. And then in 2013, some friends and I got really tired of university, like being an adjunct or being a professor, kind of being in that world. And we were thinking like, you know, these colleges are really expensive, like Parsons, SVA, a lot of these like private art, you know, programs are really costly. Like, could we make a low cost school around the thing that we love, around coding and electronics and theory, all these things that make art, you know, with software. So we created the School for Poetic Computation. It's an experimental artist-run school. We're based in New York. We have 10-week programs that are really low cost, like not, you know, not like a private university, but like really designed to be affordable. Although, like, obviously, you got to come to New York, or you know,
right.
it's not. They're not. But it's it's open. We publish the finances on GitHub, and we are like really. It's really like an artist-run school, and it's been, yeah, just a joy to see students come through there and then see students like come back and become teachers and then administrators and have like this cycle of just yeah, really good energy, really good vibe. And what I do there is I teach creative coding, and I teach classes that are about kind of interacting with history and recreating work from the past.
Oh wow, that's awesome. You know, if you guys ever do anything with NFTs, I'd love to come on and have a conversation with your students. You know, I definitely am more than open to
Oh,
doing it myself to contribute however I can.
that's awesome. Yeah, we'd love to have you by.
And I lied. I have one last question, and then I'll
Yeah.
let you go. The what's your favorite NFT?
Oh, so I was thinking about this. I don't know if I have a single favorite NFT, but I'm going to mention some artists whose work I really love, whose drops I really love. And let me pull up my browser, so I make sure I reference people the right way. So one thing I want to mention is a project by, there's a designer whose work I really admire named David Rudnick, and he has this project which is called Exodus, and it's a set of poems that are on the blockchain, and they are auctioned at different time intervals, and it's actually going to take like years. Like they go well into the future. I think the last one, let me pull it up. It's going to take 40 years to go through all of the poems that he's set up to have auctions at different times. So he'll be like 75 years old when the final one is auctioned. And I really like projects that play with time or time scale. I thought that was really interesting. I'm a big fan of, there's an artist named Ree Myers, and she did a lot of like early blockchain artwork. There's a group called Furtherfield that have done just like really interesting exhibitions around blockchain. And to me, that stuff is really interesting. I'm a fan of Def Beef. That's an artist that does a lot of kind of on-chain generative coding, but also thinking about NFTs that change, like when the NFT changes ownership, the artwork itself changes. So kind of playing with the form, like playing with what is an NFT. I'm gonna mention a few more. Sorry for all the name drops.
Go for it.
There is one project that I've been following that I really love is sorry, I'm going to butcher everybody's name. Dimitri. So the artist who created Ringers, Dimitri Cherniak. So he has this project, which I'm fascinated with, called Dead Ringers, where he's generating this art and sending it to random wallet addresses. And it's really like probably like nobody will ever be able to receive this work, but it just seems like this really, to me, it's this like kind of beautiful poetic gesture. Like I'm going to make this thing and just send it out randomly into the world. And I really like those kinds of projects that are like this poetic gesture. And then the last thing I want to plug a generative artist. So I was thinking about kind of whose work do I just like admire. Like one of this generative artists that I really admire is, and I'm going to butcher her name. It's Iskra Velichkova, but her on Twitter is Pointline. It's like Pointline with an underscore. And after this podcast, I'm happy to just send you a bunch of links. But she's like, she does this stuff on Tezos, which is just it's so beautiful. I think it makes me, it's like one of these artists that you follow, and just anytime they drop something, it just makes me really happy. And to me, I can't say like there's one NFT that I like admire the most, but these are some artists that I follow that I think the work they do is really special.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna be looking all of them up right after and start following them. But yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you taking the time to come onto the show and talk about what you were doing with Adidas and Prada, as well as all the stuff that you're working on and your thoughts on the space. So thank you for taking the time, and I really appreciate it.
Likewise, thanks so much. And it's like, so that story that you opened with is hilarious. I haven't thought about that in years, so I was like, that was really great. Thanks for the great conversation.
Good. Yeah, thank you. And everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.